All right, History 112, folks. This is the beginning of Unit 7. And I got to tell you, Unit 7 is just a huge unit as far as the swath of history goes. And so I can't talk about everything, but there's three different chapters that it covers, and each of those chapters is huge. So I'm going to try to do a bit of just a quick video on each one at this particular point. Some of you are wondering about my background, and actually at this point I'm in my office at home, so this will alleviate a lot of questions about well, what does my office at home look like at this particular point. So I'll let you study the background as I'm talking. What I wanted to talk about with chapter 30 is listen, we left World War One. We got into the Cold War. We know Stalin wasn't happy with our reaction time, and so post World War II, we're going to step into the Cold War. We're going to be looking at the idea of the growth of communism in Europe, that birth of the Iron Curtain, the birth of Comecon, the birth of this whole communist movement spreading out, versus our alliances that are going to form with Western Europe at this particular point. And that's hugely important, okay? It's hugely important because what we're trying to do is we're trying to prop up democracy. So you have to realize this starts with Truman. It's going to go to Eisenhower. It's going to go ahead and go to Kennedy. And he's going to have a short-lived, a very important window here. And it's going to go into Johnson. And from Johnson, it goes into Nixon. And so there's a whole lot happening. And that's just in Chapter 30 at this particular point. But there's two things that it has in common. One is going to be this Cold War, this struggle against the faction of this communist ideal, against the freedom of this democratic ideal. The other thing you're going to look at is a struggle for human rights. Not just human rights, not just civil rights, but a combination between the two. Because we know that here in the United States, in the 50s, in the 60s, we have a huge movement for civil rights, because part of that is going to be that continuation from World War I, World War II, when we have the African American soldiers coming back who've made a statement, who have helped, who have fought, who have earned some medals, who have earned some recognition, who have bled the same color of blood as everyone else. They're going to demand the respect. They're going to demand the equality, and so that's going to be a big part of that movement. But that's also going to fit in with a couple other movements here. One of those is going to be the struggle for independence for a lot of colonial countries. So we're going to continue the struggle in India. We're going to look at the same struggle in South Africa at this particular point, and those two are uniquely joined. Many folks don't realize the history of Mahatma Gandhi. Mahatma Gandhi is actually, he's an Indian lawyer, yes, but he's an Indian lawyer in South Africa. And so when the South African independence movement, the anti-colonial movement breaks out, that struggle for equality there, he is there and he is representing, he is seeing, he is involved some in that particular fight. And then he ends up leaving and realizing, hey, this fight is going on here, and this is the same one we should be having at home, because we are second-class citizens in our own country. And so he's going to end up in India fomenting the struggle for civil rights, for respect for Indian independence that started before World War II, and this is going to continue on. And so you look at this struggle, it talks about in South Africa, it talks about apartheid. It talks about Kwame Nkrumah. It talks about Jomo Kenyatta. It talks about Patrice Lumumba. And all those folks are part of the African, or going to be part of the African National Congress about that struggle. And of course, there's one missing, which is Nelson Mandela. And he's going to figure hugely into this. So I want you to realize that that's happening. But then it starts to talk about Jawaharlal Nehru. And it talks about Ahmed Sukarno. And it talks about Gamal Abdel Nasser. And Nasser is going to be not there. He is going to be over in the Arab states, struggling there. But it's, again, part of that same movement, because it's going on in India. It's going to go on in Egypt. It's going to go on in the Southeast. And so there's a lot of things happening. What you have to realize is near the top of this chapter, it talks about the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency. That's going to be our outreach arm, folks. We're not going to be actively wanting to be involved in wars per se, but we want to have some political influence. And CIA is going to give us our political influence. It's going to work undercover, fomenting a lot of disunion, a lot of dissatisfaction, but it's going to be pushing the ideals of what we consider the best state. It's going to be pushing the ideals of democracy. But while it's going on, we're also going to be involved in a series of proxy wars. We don't want to fight Russia. Russia doesn't want to fight us, but we don't want either one to have the political upper hand. We don't want to lose face. And so what's going to happen is we're going to look at a series of struggles. That first one is going to be in Korea. The next one is going to be in Vietnam. These proxy wars are going to be us propping up one side, and either China or the Soviet Union, either one is communist, propping up the other side, providing the tools, providing the weapons, providing the training, providing the advisors to properly help these people fight the war and to guarantee that our side is going to win. I relate it to the Spanish Civil War, folks. The Spanish Civil War really wasn't about Spanish or Civil War. It was about other actionaries fighting each other, and that's what really this is going to be. And so it's going to be a series of fights. It's going to be a series of battles. Honestly, we had no business being in Korea and fighting in Korea. I think we made the problem worse. But while we're fighting Korea, the CIA is already working with the French, and the French are working to recolonialize or recolonize Vietnam. And Vietnam is not all about that. The Southeast Asia is not all about being recolonized, but they're going to insist. And what's going to happen is in their attempts to recolonize, they're going to utterly fail. When the Japanese leave the Southeast, they're going to leave a couple of factions in place. We're going to empower one faction for democracy. The Russians are going to empower the other faction for communism. And so that's going to be the split in Korea between North and South. It's also going to be the split that happens in Vietnam between North and South. We're going to allow them to draw lines, and then we're going to pull back, and all hell is going to break loose. And what's going to happen is we're going to help. We begin helping the French, and then we end up saying, "God blast it, French, you don't know how to fight. Here, hold my beer, and we'll show you how this is done." And we're going to put in tactics, believe it or not, that we learned from the Germans. We're going to be using close air support. We're going to be using, almost in some cases, blitzkrieg-style tactics with that air infantry coming in. And the problem is our hearts, our American hearts, not in this battle. We have had the whole World War II. We had the Korean War. Now we're involved in another war far from home. And it doesn't directly affect us. It doesn't directly threaten us. And so we're not in this. And at the same time, what we're looking at is we're looking at struggles on the home front. We're looking at a rise in the struggle for civil rights because the African American, the Mexican American, the Native American populations are going to be struggling for freedom. And so if you look, you'll see several different militant factions, whether it is the Black Panthers, whether it's a variety of things. They're struggling for rights, and they're struggling correctly for rights. They're demanding them, and they're having to fight against several other groups along the way. We know in this point we're going to look at the Cuban Missile Crisis. We're going to look at the death of Kennedy, his assassination. We're going to look at the rise of Johnson and his idea of creating this great society, about fighting this whole idea against fighting the war on poverty. And so what he wants to do is create a better nation in a way by creating, in some cases, a community college system, the Higher Education Act. He is going to try to fight that war, but unfortunately his funding is going to be stolen by another war. It's going to be stolen by the Vietnam War. And so he is only going to be so effective. Ike's only going to be so effective. And unfortunately, after that, we get into Nixon. And Nixon is a unique character because he is going to be caught doing some underhanded things. So I'm going to let you go ahead and do the reading. And the next chapter I'll pick up on will be chapter 31. All right, thank you.